Super Mario 64. Since I end up basically saying, hey, you know what, I actually really want to end up reviewing this game, or taking a look at Super Mario 64 to be exact, since I already did Odyssey, and considering that's like the recent 3D Mario game aside from Bowser's Fury, I said, you know what, why not? I'm probably going to end up doing Sunshine at some point, and probably also going to doing Galaxy as well, to give my thoughts about those two games too. So, Super Mario 64 was a game that my cousins end up borrowing from a friend of theirs, and we end up having enjoyment of a time. Except for me. I didn't really know how to play Super Mario 64 at the time, because at first, it was also one of the first 3D games that I played. Not only being Mario's first jump into a 3D platformer, because considering Mario's Teachings Typing, which came out before Super Mario 64, was actually the first appearance of not only Charles Martinet, Mario's voice actor, but also his floating 3D head.
You're fantastic! I know you're going to be a great typist one day.
We don't really talk about that much. In fact, you can kind of end up saying that the whole floating 3D head that you end up getting at the intro cutscene might be a reference to it. I wouldn't put it past Nintendo, considering they love to reference most of their old projects. Sometimes. Anyways, to go ahead and go a little bit further ahead, I think it's time for us to end up getting started on this little Code Pika video as we end up taking a little bit of a dive on Super Mario 64. Hope you guys end up enjoying. Let's begin.
Dear Mario, please come to the castle. I have baked a cake for you. Yours truly, Princess Toadstool. Peach.
So to start things off, there are two versions of Super Mario 64 that you end up having the luxury of playing. You either have the original or you have the DS. Depending on what your preference are, if you like the terms of graphics, you probably might go for the 64 version on the DS, or you might go for the original one if you just want for nostalgic purposes. I personally would choose the DS over the original, mainly because the DS version has a bit more content compared to the OG version. If you want your bang for your buck, I recommend probably playing the DS version, if I'm being honest with you. You have extra courses, you have extra bosses to end up fighting, you also have extra characters to play as, extra mechanics, a bunch of more stars to end up going after, and you know, you have a better graphics engine to play with. The only negative I can give to the DS version is obviously the fact that you're playing off of a D-pad. Now, you might think that this is a bit of a problem, but compared to the original game of Super Mario 64, the DS version, you have the capabilities of having a dedicated run button. It's kind of weird because that was kind of the thing that I had to register in my brain at the time, because when I first played the DS version, when I got it, it was not registered that there was an actual run button, which makes sense because in the 2D games, you know, you had a run button to begin with. Unless, you know, you're one of those type of people that played the NES Mario game and didn't realize there was a run button and didn't really read the instruction manual, then, well, I don't know what to tell you. Anywho, obviously you might be knowing that, yes, I did grow up with the DS version, so I have a little bit of a nostalgic attachment to the DS version compared to, you know, anything else for that matter. The OG version is still something to place in other people's hearts, but not mine, since I played the DS version, managed to 100% the DS version, so the DS version is my go-to. But that's not to discredit the OG version, considering the fact that Nintendo only putted the OG version on the Super Mario All-Stars port, or I should say the 3D All-Stars collection. I would have preferred them if they just magically enhanced the graphics of the DS version and, you know, put it in there. Probably would have been worth the buck, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. It's like, I mean, hey, we got Sunshine. Sunshine hasn't been re-released in like forever. So you can actually end up having the capabilities of playing Super Mario 64 on the N64. They skipped the GameCube for some reason. I don't really understand why they did that, but to each their own. They end up, you have the abilities to play it on the Wii, you have the ability to play on the Wii U, and you now have the ability to play it on the Nintendo Switch. If you didn't get the 3D All-Stars, don't worry, they got you covered. They re-released it on the Nintendo Switch Online store. Don't have online either? Well, I hope you still have your Wii U and your Wii, because that's probably like the only way you're probably playing the game. So, what do I think of the story of Super Mario 64? Well, the story is the same thing as every other 2D Mario game. Bowser kinda kidnap Princess Peach, and also is essentially home base is inside the castle for some reason. So the story is that Bowser essentially utilized what is known as the Power Stars, not the Superstars back in the 2D era. It more so is the Power Stars, which are now MacGuffins that have the capabilities of, I guess, causing some powers to be initiated. I don't know, because all I know is that Bowser basically sealed Princess Peach inside her castle and also trapped the Toads in a limbo of jumping up and down, and that's really about it. That's really all he did. It's super weird when you really think about it from a very weird standpoint, but it's not unheard of considering the original plot point for Mario, and I don't know if it's still a plot point, is that Bowser kind of utilized the magic to turn all the citizens of the Mushroom Kingdom into blocks? I don't know. Anyways, it's Mario's job to collect all the Power Stars to be able to take out Bowser once and for all and rescue Princess Peach. And that's pretty much the entire plot. Mario has to go through 15 courses to be able to obtain these Power Stars from either foes, from obstacle courses, you name it. And that is the main premise of Super Mario 64. And something that they would start to do for majority of all the 3D games up to come, to be honest. Because if you really think about it, after Super Mario 64, every other 3D Mario game has the same type of staple thing that you're doing. You have to collect a certain amount of things to be able to end up progressing. You have to end up collecting different types of MacGuffins. You got either star coins, green stars, power stars, shine sprites, you name it, moons. Like, that's literally the concept around Mario, and I feel it works. In all honesty, hell, they even decided to even implement that into the 2D era type games too, by allowing you to collect many other things with the star coins themselves. And like I said, it fits Mario because as times went on, they didn't want to continue with the same run to the right and you win sort of deal. So I can understand why they decided to do it in this sort of way where you have to collect things, and why Odyssey is such a wonderful game, because all you're doing is exploring these hub-like levels similar to Sunshine Galaxy and 64, and you're just collecting things. That's it. You just go, you just do what you need to do, and that's about it. Each and every single course of Super Mario 64 ends up implementing different types of missions that you need to do, such as the first course, Bob-omb Battlefield, where you have to end up taking down the Big Bob-omb, which he's more so of a king in the DS version, so I'm gonna just call him King Bob-omb. In course number 2, you have a similar thing where you have to go up top of Whomp's fortress to take out the Whomp King. In course number 3, you have Jolly Roger Bay, which basically introduces the whole underwater mechanic, and it kind of ends up introducing that Mario's life and his air are both one of the same. They changed this in Sunshine by making it into a separate health bar, which, I mean, to be fair, kind of makes more sense because it'd be kind of broken if you can just infinitely get your life back just by rising from the surface. The next area is Cool Cool Mountain, which will basically give you an indicator that you'll probably be falling in bottomless pits. In fact, that's probably the majority of your deaths in this game, is that if you are in a small, course, you're gonna fall in a bottomless pit. There are some courses that are more flat and not just floating in the air. You kind of feel like there's a civilization to some extent, but some of the other courses are kind of just floating islands where you can just fall in a bottomless pit and then you just cry about it. Course number 5 is Big Boo's Haunt, which allows you to explore a glorified hub world of the Big Boo's Mansion, because your hub world is actually Peach's castle, but every time you reset the game you always start out in the garden, so you have to go into Peach's castle again. But that's the majority of your hub world, there is Peach's castle, so you're basically exploring each and every single nook and cranny trying to find paintings. It's a little bit misleading though, because you think you can jump into every single painting, because there's one area in the 3rd floor where there's a bunch of paintings and you think you can jump into them, but you can't. Only just a few of them you can. But that's kind of how you end up getting into your levels, is by jumping into paintings instead. So whenever you end up seeing yourself a painting, you already know what to do. Don't do it, because you ain't going through any sort of level. I would love it if the Nintendo world actually ended up implementing something like that. That would be so cool, but I highly doubt they'll do something like that. Anyways, the next course is actually Hazy Maze Cave, and this is actually the introduction where you'll probably end up finding your first cap. You might also find your first cap in the main hub of Peach's Castle, and you're probably wondering, what are the caps? Well, the caps are essentially Mario's power-ups. Mario does not have his traditional power-ups such as the Super Mushroom, because he's always big, or his Fire Flower power-up. In fact, the caps end up giving Mario the capabilities of gliding, the capabilities of turning invisible, and also the capability of turning metal. These caps are more so situational. You're not going to be utilizing them in terms of exploring like different parts of the levels and what have you. They're only utilized one time sometimes to be able to just get something and then just move on. It's really unfortunate, and I feel that the DS version kind of utilizes them a bit better, but not by much, considering the fact that the DS version, the power-ups, all the caps are kind of separated by different types of characters. Like, for instance, Luigi can use the invisible stuff, Wario can use the metal stuff, and Mario can use two types of power-ups, which is basically floating like a balloon or the wing cap, depending on which level you're at. More on the DS version later. Let me just get more into the courses. We got course number 7, which is Lethal Lava Land, and just like the name, it's pretty lethal. In course number 8, you got Shifting Sandland, which, now that I'm reading these, that is pretty clever how 7, 8, and 9 all are alliteration. Never noticed that. That's kind of clever. You got Lethal Lava Land, Shifty Sandland, and Dire Docks. Okay, that's interesting, Nintendo. Y'all are funny. Dire Docks is a very unique level that you have to actually beat it the first time by boarding the Bowser sub to be able to enter Bowser's other boss arena. Snowman Land is course number 10, and it's basically a center stage with a snowman in the middle. Course number 11 is Wet Dry World, which is pretty unique depending on the elevation of where you jump on the painting, depends on what the level of the water will be at. Number 12 is Tall Mountains, where you're basically going up a vertical mountain to get to the top. Course number 13 is most people's favorite levels in terms of World 7 in Mario Bros. 3, which is Tiny Huge Island. And this is a pretty interesting area. Depending if you go through the small painting or the large painting, you will either start out big or you'll start out small. Number 14 is Tick Tock Clock, which also has a very unique gimmick, is that depending on what time you go into the clock, you will end up basically stopping the level, making the level faster, or slowing down the level. And course number 15, Rainbow Ride. People are familiar with this course if you are the person who played Super Smash Bros. Melee. It's actually the course that it represents, and it's actually the Rainbow Cruise course. This area is pretty unique in a sense that it's nothing but bombless pits, and that's the only uniqueness that you're probably ever going to get in that stage. Overall, all these stages are unique in their own way. Some can be a little bit of copy and paste, which you're kind of just doing the same thing. Like Tall Mountains could just be a bigger swamp fortress. Snowman Land can obviously just be a glorified Cool Mountain, a much smaller scale of it, anyways, and less lethal. Lethal Lava Land might as well be the opposite of Shifting Sandland, and Dire Docks might as well just be the more ocean water-ish area of Jolly Roger Bay, I guess, or the more factory-ish like level. I don't know how to really explain that sort of comparison. So, what courses do I like specifically? I guess I could say I like Big Boo's Haunt, I like Bob-omb's Battlefield for its introduction, I like Hazy Maze Cave, and I also like Wet Dry World. Not really a huge fan of most of the other courses because some of them are either Bombless Pit Hell or not really that interesting. When I ended up playing the DS version, me and my ridiculous imagination, I used to kind of think that, you know, there were like other people playing us alongside me. It's weird. Look, sometimes when you're by yourself, you gotta make up some sort of friggin' entertainment for yourself for these kind of games. Hell, I do that for Majora's Mask, where I assume that there's some bunch of multiplayer MMO style type of thing. Back then when you were young, I couldn't really play MMO games. You gotta understand that. So what makes the DS version vastly different compared to the original version? Aside from certain control changes, obviously I did mention that you have the capabilities of playing Luigi, Wario, and also Yoshi as well. You start out the game as Yoshi because the intro, Peach is obviously inviting everybody to wonderful cake. Mario, Luigi, and Wario ends up getting out of their pipes, ending up going into the castle, but for some reason they end up getting captured by Bowser. How? I don't know. Yoshi, who was essentially asleep on top of the castle, which you can meet when you end up collecting 120 stars in the original Super Mario 64 game, and he basically wakes up and he goes to rescue his friends. So yeah, that's pretty much the difference in the premise of Super Mario 64 DS, is just that you play as Yoshi first before you could get to play as the other three characters, because you have to go ahead and find Mips, which is a bunny-like character who has keys in the DS version, who for some reason also has keys to the characters' doors, and you need to find these Mips to gain access to minigame doors. I also forgot to mention that Mips actually does not have the key to the boss. I mean, does not have the key to the character's door. It's actually something a little bit different. So you have to go through certain courses. Sometimes they're in courses and sometimes they're not. Sometimes they could just be in randomly in Peach's castle. You have to find these random areas. Well, not really random. You have to find these areas, these special zone areas, and fight the king variations of a Goomba, a Chill, and a King Boo to be able to end up getting the corresponding key for that character. The Goomba is for Mario, the Chill is for Wario, and the King Boo is obviously for Luigi. Once you end up managing to get these keys, you can be able to end up unlocking the door to gain access to that character permanently, which allows you to just switch between a character. What's the benefit of it is, well, sometimes some levels kind of require Mario, and sometimes levels require Wario and Luigi. Yoshi has the capabilities of wearing caps that will be spread out throughout the level once you've actually rescued them. Sometimes they do put them in the stages anyways, but that's very rare, and you kind of have to like end up still unlocking the character regardless to be able to do everything else. There are a lot more stars in the DS version. In fact, what's funny is that there are two lines of dialogue that Bowser can say. In the original, he basically says like, oh, I didn't know that there were like more stars or whatever, and keep that joystick smoking and whatever. While in the DS version, he basically ends up stating that, oh, I didn't know that there were like extra stars in the friggin' castle, and like keep that D-pad smoking. Even though I would say trying to beat Bowser is very complicated for me as a kid. So I keep mentioning Bowser, but I don't end up mentioning how you're supposed to get to him. So once you end up managing to obtain enough power stars, you can gain access to some of these doors that will allow you to head into Bowser's lair. You essentially do a glorified 2D platforming segment, and you end up fighting Bowser. The way how you fight Bowser is by tossing him. And now the problem with me is that I have nervous reactions when I'm tossing Bowser, and I'm very grateful that in future games they never do this again. And if they ever do this, I'm probably going to have a very nervous handshake when it comes to trying to do those boss fights. I don't like spinning characters around because I always fail at it when I'm trying to time the jump to be able to hit him on the bomb. It's annoying being me sometimes, you know? I mean, hey, what are you going to do? So yeah, that's kind of the premise. Once you've managed to beat Super Mario 64, you're probably wondering what else can you do? In the original one, there's not much you can really do. But in the DS version, however, the Mips that I mentioned before, if you can go out of your way to obtain these Mips, they will give you keys to mini-game doors. And there are a lot of mini-game doors. Each character ends up having corresponding types of mini-games, just as Wario's mini-games is more so pertain to actually doing a little bit more faster paced mini games. Mario's mini games can pertain to doing like platforming bits. Luigi is gambling for some random reason. I don't understand that. And Yoshi's one is very weird. I mean, sometimes they're good and sometimes they're the love me not and love me thing. And I'm gonna be honest with you, if you're like me and probably associate that to being a realistic questionnaire thing, don't, because it's kind of bad when you kind of get it 3 times in a row. At that point, you're just sad and you just stop. But no, in all honesty, like I said, I really wish that they gave us the DS version instead, because now people won't even end up, you know, exploring the full definitive version of Super Mario 64. I'm pretty sure there's somewhere out there on the internet that you could probably find like some sort of way to playing the DS version with better controls, like with the joystick, because I'll be real with you, D-pad controls for Super Mario 64, if it did not have the run button, it would be a nightmare and a half, because the controls for 64 originally, they're not that great. Like, they are a bit jank, they're not tight in the slightest for one thing, and there's a lot of times that you can just slip and fall and just die. And I mean, to each their own. I don't know how we managed to play these games as kids, but then again, we had knowledge of it being the first time on the N64, and that was like Mario's first time in the 3D. After that, they basically just started to make other Nintendo franchises into 3D. You got Kirby, semi 3D, I should say. He's not full on 3D because you can't move in a 3D playing field, but it's semi 3D. You got obviously The Legend of Zelda, you got Star Fox, F-Zero, you got like a bunch of like Mario jumping into the 3D era was a very big deal for a lot of people who grew up with him in the NES and Super Nintendo era, because it was a different take. I thought that, like, personally, I didn't really think that they were going to do bad with transitioning him into 3D, because in all honesty, what does Mario usually do? Jump on Goombas, collect things, bada boom, that's it. That's usually all he does. And that doesn't really stop there. And there's a reason as to why people are usually always excited. There are some people that prefer the 2D games, and that's very understandable, but most people probably will always gravitate towards the 3D game. And there's a 3D game for like almost everybody. There's 64, Sunshine, Galaxy 1 and 2, Odyssey, 3D World, 3D Land, you know, you name it. They got a lot of things for everybody, and that's the kind of thing that I love about it. It's a lot of diversity, different types of gameplay mechanics that can be either good or bad depending on your playstyle, and, you know, overall just good. I still love Super Mario 64, even though, you know, I complain about the gameplay controls can be a bit jank here and there, but hey, not every game is perfect, you know? So anyways, that's it. I don't want to continue this any further than I have to. I think I basically gotten all my thoughts out for you guys. So I think I'm good. Anyways, this is kind of like a little bit of a short style video. Anyway, but you guys already know how I am. It's a short thing. If I want to do a long video, then wait for the next video. Anyways, I've been Pika, and I'll be seeing you guys next time for more electrifying videos. Catch you guys later. See yas!